on, guys? Hope everyone's having a great day. In today's video, I want to discuss the return of the famous flick shot, which has appeared a few times on my channel before. However, considering how often Fortnite changes its mechanics, I'm sure you can understand why the use of the flick has varied throughout the lifespan of this game. And so in today's video, I'm going to be discussing and getting you guys up to speed on the most efficient way to utilize the flick as we near the end of Season 10. Although I do use controller myself, this method of using the flick applies to both controller players as well as mouse and keyboard players, so don't worry about that. So if you don't know, a flick is simply a fast movement of your reticle in any given direction, whereas traditional aiming is much slower and requires taking time to line up your shot. At first glance, if you just look at the flick compared to traditional aiming, it might just appear more flashy. However, I assure you that there is much more to the flick than just its looks. Now, before I get into the explanation / tutorial segments of this video, I do want to play a quick montage edit that I prepared specifically for this tutorial that will show you guys not only proper utilization of the flick, but also how what I'm going to be explaining later in the video should actually look in game. As a content creator for my audience, I believe in making this stuff as enjoyable as I possibly can. However, if you don't want to see these visual examples and the clips, I completely understand. Here's the timestamp on your screen right now that will skip you to the explanation segment. But if you are interested in seeing more clips like the one that I just played for you guys, then keep watching. So when it comes to flickshotting on PC, it's always been a viable option and always will be, as these players can achieve a greater range of motion through the use of a mouse. Controller flickshotting, on the other hand, which is mainly what I've covered on this channel, has been an on and off subject, you could say. At this point in Season X, both players, like I suggested in the intro, can utilize these tips that I'm about to give. However, before I do that, I do very briefly want to discuss the history of console flicks so that you can better piece together and understand why they've made a return and become viable once again in Season 10. I promise I will be very quick about this. So around Season 2 to 4, the aiming system was set up in such a way that it severely benefited flick shots. I made a tutorial explaining exactly how that worked, and all was good. Then Epic decides to change the aim mechanics in Season 4, and I think it was 4.3, and I don't exactly have the time to get into that change. Long story short, flick shots became much more difficult. Alongside this, the skill level of the average player was beginning to rise dramatically, to the point that by Season 7, it was best to avoid flick shots altogether and just focus on simple key movements of the reticle to win fights. I also explained this in a video, so if you want more detail on that, that video will also be linked down below. The idea here was to simplify your combat approach to be more consistent, as flickshotting tends to be inconsistent at times. So this begs the question now, 3 seasons later, what role do flick shots play now? I'll tell you, the answer might actually surprise you. First off, it's Season 10, and at this point, the skill level of the average player has now risen even higher. At this point, you typically can't even edit down on the average player without them expecting it and you taking damage. So here's the key reason why flicks have returned. What we're seeing now in Fortnite is a rise in the level of creativity in which people must go about defeating defeating their opponents. The process has simply become more complicated and requires a more creative approach to take down your opponents in pub matches. We see this in the way that we do trap eliminations, edit plays, etc. This is where the flick has made a crucial return to your combat sandbox. So the question we'll now dive into and answer is, how do we use these flick shots in a creative way to help us take down our opponents? By far, one of the most effective methods to take down your opponents in a build fight, and again this works for mouse and keyboard and controller players, is to actually jump off the side of your build, flick shot your reticle at your opponent, and then immediately build beneath you or around you to catch yourself and keep you at a good advantage position-wise on the builds. This completely throws off your opponent as you are damaging him from an angle which they had no idea they could ever receive damage from. Now the secret sauce is not in the move itself, it's actually how you perform it. You must be effective in deciding what situations to use it in. For example, you need to understand that the flick is still a more risky tool compared to traditional aiming, and for that reason you should reserve it for either desperate situations or situations in which you are controlling the fight. You never want to take a flick shot when you have the disadvantage in terms of health, positioning, etc. Now with that understood, there's two basic ways to jump off and shoot at your opponent, then build beneath you. The first way is you could jump, essentially you aim traditionally and then you look down and build to catch yourself. The second method is what we just discussed. You could jump and flick, which means after you pull the trigger, you continue your shot path to build beneath you. It's a seamless transition. The first method guarantees a more likely hit at the cost of being slower to catch yourself and keep you higher on your builds. Method number two, utilizing a flick in this situation will mean a slightly less chance of actually hitting your opponent, but will ensure that you keep more momentum and positioning on your builds. The easiest way I can explain this is by taking a look at our thumbnail here. As you can see, the arrow is indicating the direction of your reticle. It starts out in the direction of the player, right, your enemy player, and then makes a sharp turn back to whichever direction you need to build. The key here is there is no hindrance or buffer time between the shot and going to build. The transition, like I said before, is seamless because your reticle doesn't stop moving or slow down like it would when using the traditional method of aiming. Both methods are great to use depending on the situation. You simply need to learn how to evaluate when to use each one. Now that I've shown you guys visual examples and the logic behind using flicks to your advantage in Season 10, I want to show you guys how I practice personally, and hopefully that can reflect and help you guys out. So when it comes to practice, think of it the same way as you warming up your shot. To warm up the flick, you want to practice in low pressure situations. This could be on an opponent which is down, or maybe an opponent that is just simply running away from you like a headless chicken. This clip right here is great demonstrating both of these, and as you can see, I hit some pretty nice flicks, and you can really see the follow-up of my build path after the flick on the guy that's running away. Just to give you guys an example of how that looks. More of in like a circular motion rather than a straight diagonal like the thumbnail suggests. And after using this in low pressure situations enough times in pub matches, you'll start to find yourself being more comfortable applying the flicks to higher pressure situations. It all takes time, it's a process, so don't get frustrated when things don't click immediately. Now to actually use this and transition to high pressure situations, the best way to do this is to mimic the high pressure situations but in a low pressure environment. This can be achieved by using flicks on your friends in a 1v1. After that, use this on players that you don't actually know in 1v1 creative mode build fights, and this will increase the pressure a little bit. And once you're comfortable with both of these concepts, you should be ready to apply the flick in the highest pressure situations, that being pub match build fights. In my experience, the more I practice the flick method, the more consistent my flick becomes, and more smoothly I reap the benefits of doing so. With that said, that's all I got for you guys. Hopefully that was enjoyable. My goal this year is 200,000 subs, so if you guys aren't already subscribed, I would greatly appreciate if you would do so. And also leave a like on the video if it did help you out, and that way I know to do more videos like these in the future. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you all next time. Peace.